Hi, I'm Emma Harper. I'm curator at the British Postal Museum and Archive. I have up today a selection of postcards from our museum collection that show various different stories that I'm going to discuss with Guy. So the first one is quite an early picture postcard of a London postman emptying a letterbox. And if I turn it over, you'll see that at this point we've still got the address only to be written on this side. So this is before the introduction of the divided back, but you can see that he's got round that a little bit he's got the picture, but there's a little space at the bottom, so he says, won't be down till Monday night. The next two, these are showing women in the workforce. The post office was actually quite a large employer of women, particularly during the First World War. This expanded with a lot of men going off to fight, which we'll come on to in a minute. This is a photo postcard of a woman who was a postman during the First World War, showing her uniform nicely and very proud, holding the letters ready to post. A few years later, you've got a sort of cartoon style one saying the lady postman going around with the mails, and a play on words there. We can tell it's a bit later from the style of hat that she's wearing. That's more 1920s than 1910s. But it shows that even though by this point women had kind of proved themselves in post office work, the general approach to women in work is still quite derogatory, quite playful at the same time, but quite mocking, shall we say.
And there's some here sort of showing some of the different uniforms as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it shows sort of, again, the rise of sending a postcard as a very personal item. So it's a picture of him all smart in his uniform. And if I turn it over, he says, with kind regards from the one on the other side. So it's really linking the message to the picture on the front. I just love this one. It says, "This is Mr. Jackson B." And he's there, all in his uniform, as a kind of vignette.
Fantastic.
These are just vital for images, really, of the post office and its work throughout the ages. So there are some great ones in there.
And I suppose, given that any image ended up on a postcard,
yeah.
That's not surprising that the post office itself is recorded on the front of a postcard.
Definitely.
And this second theme, Emma, is much more sombre than the first, as this shows the cards relating to the post office rifles.
Yeah.
Who were the post office rifles?
So the post office rifles was the post office's own battalion. They were set up in 1868 originally, so it's not just in the two world wars. In the First World War, about 75,000 men from the post office joined up to fight in the war, and I think about 12,000 of those joined the post office rifles, so their own battalion. And just a month after the war began, so many people were joining that a second battalion had to be set up. And the post office rifles really played quite an important part, particularly in the First World War. They fought at Ypres and Somme and Passchendaele as well. And we have a lot of material surrounding them. We also have Victoria Cross, which was awarded to a postman, to Alfred Knight, for courageous work in battle.
And is that here at the archive?
Yeah, that's in the museum collection as well.
Right.
So these postcards show sort of two different sides of it, really. This one is very much sort of promoting the work of the post office rifles as a good, battalion, and sort of it says responding nobly to the call of king and country. So that's very impressive. And then this one is the slightly more jokey, the Hun afraid that the post office rifles are coming.
But the post office then was pretty much the size of an army in it itself, wasn't it?
Definitely, yeah. And as I said earlier, it was the reason that as I said, 75,000 men went off to fight in the war, that gave women the opportunity to come forward and take over some of their work. And it also led to other developments. For example, women weren't as familiar with the postal routes of delivery, so that's when you get more pushes for the introduction of systems that eventually led to postcodes, so defining areas so that they could work out where they were going.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, so they really are sort of the basis of a lot of other things,
Yeah.
really.
And then the final theme of the postcards that you've got out from the archive today are, well, postcards that have been used for propaganda of sorts.
Two different sides of it, really. This one was produced by the Post Office to advertise the service of sending a registered letter. And what I just found interesting, having previously looked through the files and seen how the Post Office was worried about the form of a postcard, is that eventually they're so accepting of it that they're using it to promote their own services, in this case the registered letter. So I just thought that was an interesting contrast, really. This second one is a little bit different, and you need a little bit of context around it. We call it an anti-suffragette postcard. Now, the suffragette movement did target the Post Office, mainly because it was a government organisation, it had that link with authority. And the way they did that was in various different methods, but they tried to attack post boxes, as you can see here. She's poured oil and matches into it, and the post box is steaming. So then postcards were produced against that, so anti-suffragette ones, and here is the automatic suffragette exterminating pillar box, patents not applied for. But it just shows, that's from 1913, and that just shows kind of the mood against suffragettes. I think we were saying earlier, most of the postcards in existence are anti-suffragette postcards. But again, just the contrast from that to a year later of the woman going to work for the Post Office. So it just all links together, really.
Well, thanks, Emma. And this is, in many ways, just a tip of the iceberg,
Definitely.
isn't it, in terms
So
of the postcards
more.
that you've got
Yeah.
here at the archive.
Yeah.
And that's something that, and people can visit the archive if they're in London.
Yeah, definitely come along. If you want to see items from the museum collection, it's best to drop us a line beforehand. But the archive, you can search, you can do family history, or just learn out more about the Post Office.